right, Sagar, what's on your radar?
Well, I should have known better than to take a vacation the week after Christmas. Usually, you can assume it's a dead time in Washington. Instead, it actually turned out to be one of the most consequential weeks in modern history of Washington policymaking. And the ultimate end state we ended up, I'm sure you all know, is that the $2,000 checks are probably dead. But it's worth pausing here in the new year, taking stock of exactly how we got here, the lessons that we're going to learn, and we can keep in mind who the real enemies of the people are today. Things, of course, started before we took off back in mid-December when Senators Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders sought to force a vote on the floor of the U.S. Senate to increase the direct payments number up to $2,000. They had leverage, and they used it. But ultimately, McConnell, even Schumer, and other Democrats wanted to fund the government so badly that they steamrolled them and they kept the check limit at $600. And it passed. Everyone jetted home to their mansions, patting themselves on the back, at all help that they could give people. But then, of course, Trump somehow emerged from the shadows to do the first good thing that he's done in a long time, which was demand $2,000 to every American man, woman, and child for the suffering that they've undergone in this pandemic. Washington panicked. The House of Representatives did something you never see them do, which is actually vote for something good, a clean extension of $2,000 to every American. And I'll admit, for a brief moment, I had hope. I thought, oh man, Trump threw the full force of MAGA behind this. Even freaking Nancy Pelosi didn't play any games. She increased the amount without attaching some BS diversity initiative. The vast majority of American people are for this thing. Not even Mitch McConnell can hold this thing up. Yeah, I probably should have been more cynical and trusted my instincts. So what happened? Well, McConnell, of course, blocked it in a particularly ingenious way. He bundled up the $2,000 checks with repeal of Section 230 reform for big tech companies and some whatever on election fraud. Of course, that nukes the bill. Sadly, it actually satisfies all sides of this debate. Democrats can rightfully point to Mitch McConnell's antics, and they can say, hey, look, see, Mitch wouldn't do anything. Republicans can use their fake concerned voice and say, what, Democrats, you don't care about reining in big tech companies and probing election fraud? What's the end result? You get totally and completely screwed. It's the most classic Washington game. When you have something immensely popular that you want to kill, but you can't just do it outright, you attach a bunch of politically divisive crap to it, and then you blame your opponents for playing games with something popular. That's it. As of this writing, the checks are dead. Will it come back? I highly doubt it, since Trump threw all his leverage away and he signed the omnibus spending bill, and now he's just going to rage tweet about election fraud for the next 18 days of his presidency. So yeah, screw Mitch McConnell. There's no both siding this one. It's literally all his fault so that he can worship at the false idol of deficit hawkery. But there is such an important lesson that I want you all to take away from this. Actually forcing change is possible, and I'll point down to the races in Georgia. David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler both suck. Let's all admit it. Neither are good politicians. They're cookie-cutter Republicans. If they get elected, it's because people just hate the left more than they're willing to hate the right. This is basically the dynamic for the majority of the Republican Party right now. When they win elections, it's as a bulwark against the cultural left, not an affirmation of their economic agenda. Usually, this gives cover to corporate ghouls of all stripes. As long as they say the right thing on abortion or defund the police, you're in the clear. You can oppose widely popular economic programs, which would actually materially change people's lives in America. Perdue is actually the perfect example of this. The multi-millionaire senator, some sketchy stock dealings in his past that usually he can just paper on over. But now he's up for re-election, and Georgia voters, like all voters, support larger checks to the American people. So when Nancy Pelosi passed an actually clean $2,000 check legislation through Congress, not even David Perdue could stand in its way. And when it passed the House, he tweeted, quote, President Trump is right. I support the push for $2,000 in direct relief to the American people. I could barely believe that because I followed this debate, and I know that Perdue was one of the chief opponents of direct payments in the past in Washington. He even bragged in a town hall not that long ago that he, quote, fought against the direct payment program of $1,200 and maintained throughout this crisis that he was, quote, personally opposed to any direct payments to Americans. And Perdue, hours later, was joined by Kelly Loeffler, making 2 of the 4 Republican senators who backed checks. So what can we learn? It's this. Even corporate ghouls, when something is clean and on their desk, and they have no excuses to vote against something, they can stand in the way of something like $2,000 checks when their election is on the line. You can despair over that, or you can rejoice, and I choose the latter, because it shows us that their ideology is actually fake. that when you bring real political pressure to bear, you can force these people to do what is both right and in the best interest politically. At the end of the day, that's how you win. Politicians are cynical people. Take a look at all the Republicans that have signed on to efforts to challenge the election results if you think I'm wrong. The only way to win is to make the cynical choice be the same as the right choice. Don't give them excuses. Don't allow your partisan representatives to stack something one way or the other, and in time, they will bend. I'm fully confident that without McConnell's machinations here, the $2,000 checks would have passed at a high margin through the Senate. Not even a majority of Senate Republicans are dumb enough to vote against it, despite being anathema to their ideology.
So the cynical choice be the right choice. Wait, what?
Legislation through Congress, not even David Perdue could stand in its way. And when it passed the House, he tweeted, quote, President Trump is right. I support the push for $2,000 in direct relief to the American people. I could barely believe that because I followed this debate, and I know that Perdue was one of the chief opponents of direct payments in the past in Washington. He even bragged in a town hall not that long ago that he, quote, fought against the direct payment program of $1,200 and maintained throughout this crisis that he was, quote, personally opposed to any direct payments to Americans. And Perdue, hours later, was joined by Kelly Loeffler, making 2 of the 4 Republican senators who backed checks. So what can we learn? It's this. Even corporate ghouls, when something is clean and on their desk and they have no excuses to vote against something, they can stand in the way of something like $2,000 checks when their election is on the line. You can despair over that, or you can rejoice, and I choose the latter, because it shows us that their ideology is actually fake, that when you bring real political pressure to bear, you can force these people to do what is both right and in the best interest politically. At the end of the day, that's how you win. Politicians are cynical people. Take a look at all the Republicans that have signed on to efforts to challenge the election results if you think I'm wrong. The only way to win is to make the cynical choice be the same as the right choice. Don't give them excuses. Don't allow your partisan representatives to stack something one way or the other, and in time, they will bend.
What is that
I'm fully confident that without McConnell's machinations here, the $2,000 checks would have passed at a high margin through the Senate. Not even a majority of Senate Republicans are dumb enough to vote against it, despite being anathema to their ideology. There's hope in that story, so let's make it happen more. And that was, I think, the only inspiring part about the checks debate, sitting and watching Perdue, and I was like, oh, God. But I mean, you saw, I was like, wow. He said he's going to vote for these checks. And why did he's in a special election, couldn't even get 50% of the vote 51% of the vote down in Georgia. Kelly Loeffler is like, I support. It's like the MAGA thing to do now to support $2,000 checks. Hey, great, right? And this is what
make it the cynical move.
What I wanted Trump to do for his entire presidency, he never did, and you know, fleetingly did now, and then threw it all away for no reason. But again, there is hope within that story, which is if you have a situation where if Pelosi, she called their bluff, rightfully, I'm glad she did it.
Yeah.
$2,000 checks straight up, nothing else, no extension.
Every Democrat except 2 voted for it, incredibly.
Every Democrat but 2. How, I mean, and what was it, 100 and something Republicans voted for? I can't remember.
40, it was only 40. I was actually surprised it was a relatively small number of Republicans, only 43.
Not idiots either.
But the point, if you look at it like, you know, in another, just years ago, just a short few years ago, you wouldn't have had any Republicans voting for this thing whatsoever. So there's so much that's instructive here. First of all, that McConnell would, and he truly has, put his hold on the Senate majority in jeopardy over this thing.
He has.
I mean, he's calculated that by bundling this together and muddying the water and being able to give Perdue and Loeffler some kind of talking point that they supported the $2,000 checks, he's betting that that's enough cover for them. I'm not sure that it is. We're about to find out whether that was actually sufficient.
Yes.
Trump's behavior here, completely instructive. Of course, he comes in at the last, after his administration and Steve Mnuchin negotiated the terrible deal that was
sat out.
That passed.
It was completely missing.
Completely sat out. Then at the last minute is like, oh, I'm going to veto it unless then he doesn't do anything to actually extract concessions. And that's the difference between like the relatively small number of Republicans who ultimately got on board with $2,000 direct checks, like clean with no bullshit attached, and the number that are signing up for his ridiculous, steal the election thing, because he's actually putting pressure on them on that thing. And so even with it being completely outrageous and baseless and insane, he can garner a lot of support for it because he's putting pressure on them. He never put pressure on them on any of this. Meanwhile, the Democrats, Pelosi actually did the right thing here, shockingly. And as we always say on the show, we give credit where credit's due, no matter where it comes from, no matter what quarter. The Senate Democrats, on the other hand, Bernie Sanders made the right move and said, look, we're going to stay here. I'm going to hold up the National Defense Authorization Act. And almost all of them, I think there were 6 senators who voted alongside Bernie Sanders to not give Mitch McConnell his way. They just fold immediately in the face of any kind of pressure because what do they care about? Everybody, all they really care about, they don't care about the checks. They care about getting their talking point. Democrats felt like they got their good talking point. Mitch McConnell felt like he got a good enough talking point. So that's the end of the story.
Yeah, and that's the despairing part. But like I said, look, at the end of the day, you got David Perdue to support $2,000 checks, and he can't put that back in the bag, right? I mean, he can try, but they're gonna be screamed at, and his constituents are probably not gonna forget it. Maybe they will.
Yeah,
we'll see.
They may not be his constituents for much
they
longer,
may not
by
be
the way.
his constituents, for a couple more days. We'll figure out how that goes tomorrow. But the way that I look at it is that you can actually see where these brief moments where you saw like Lindsey Graham back $2,000 checks. You saw, I think it was Senator Fisher was talking about $2,000 checks. And then I saw, Marco Rubio and Holly.
Yeah.
And then you had Kelly and Locke. You only needed one more, and those things were going to pass the chamber.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they got this close. And so, look, victory in war and in politics is really about doing something like 90,000 times, and then you win on the first one. All anybody's going to remember you for is that win. But you can see here that a script is written for getting something like this actually passed. And in the future, if any politician or whomever wants to try and force these two things together, that's how you can do it. And I think that anybody who wants something like this to happen, you should be hopeful. And you can say, look, if we actually try and push this thing just like this through pass, and we know it actually has 75, 80% support, these people cannot vote against it. And if you figure out the parliamentary procedure and all that, you can actually get some stuff done here.
This is a point that Rachel made a lot last week, which I think is really instructive, not only for this debate, but also ties into the force the vote debate over forcing a Medicare for all vote on the floor of the House. She's like, look, votes are important. Votes are powerful. Like, if you actually have a clean vote, and everybody has to be on the record, and they have to show their constituents what they are truly for and what they are truly against, then you can force change. And so I think that's precisely what we saw here. And unfortunately, Mitch McConnell, figured out a way to have what Rachel also called failure theater, where everybody can sort of pretend like they fought this thing, but nobody really wanted to get it done. And so once again, the cynical bet ended up being the correct bet in the end.
Well, there we go. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.
It genuinely does feel like history has found the two of you and put you in this position because so much does rest on this race, and there could not be two better individuals to represent the Democratic Party and the hopes and dreams of tens of millions of Americans.
We need to invest in America. And one of the things that both John and I agree on, and we've been talking about, is a historic investment in infrastructure, which would include also green infrastructure, so that we create jobs with a livable wage for people in the short term and position the American economy to compete in a global world amidst increasing globalization.
Reverend and I were discussing this recently, and how an infrastructure plan can really unite the people of the state because of the economic opportunity that it represents for communities, urban, suburban, and rural. Because if done right, it will mean equitable access to economic opportunity for marginalized communities, because it means that those 9 rural hospitals that have closed in 10 years can be replaced and more built. It means clinics can be built in underserved areas. It means rural broadband, which is the rural electrification of our time. It means environmental remediation where there's been contamination. It means the kinds of investments in clean energy that mean we're not only building a sustainable economy, but also one where Georgia is the leading producer of clean energy in the region. that is an initiative that can unite the people of this state, that can break down partisan barriers.
Zach, it is 2021. 2020 is over.
We made it.
The year that we all wish we could somehow erase from the memory banks. There were some good things that happened. I mean, Joe won. That was epic. That's the main thing that sticks out to me in a good way.
That's a big one. Donald Trump not being president anymore. For half the country.
Yeah, Joe's gonna get sworn in just a couple of weeks. Thank goodness. So far, 2021 is off to a fine start, but we're gonna know a whole lot more about how we're gonna feel about 2021 this week. January 5th, Tuesday, the Georgia special Senate runoffs both take place. One of the things I'm scratching my chin about is, are we going to know the results on Tuesday night?
No way. 0% chance.
Because if it's close, there's going to be a recount. Especially if the Republicans lose, there's going to be if Democrats come close, either side is very much entitled to a recount. It may be close. It may be very close. We actually have some parts of a conversation I had with both Jon Ossoff and Reverend Warnock a little bit later in this show. So just to be clear to folks, this is not like they didn't sit for a podcast interview. So
We
don't get your hopes up for a very long discourse with the Senate candidates. But I did interview them for an event, and we have some parts of that event a little bit later on. I did get to know both Reverend Warnock and Jon Ossoff over the last number of weeks, and they're great. They are truly awesome leaders, public servants. They would make phenomenal senators. Their opponents, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, are really not great at all. Like they're really, there's some Republicans I'm just like, I kind of like this person, or this person really has something to say, and that does not really describe David Perdue or Kelly Loeffler.
So for those of you who have not, for those of you listening who have not followed this race, the political Senate race in Georgia for the past number of months, which maybe include me in some ways, because I'm politicked out in a lot of ways post the presidential election. Can you give us like an overview of what the hell's going on in Georgia? You mentioned the people running, but where we're at, and just catch us all up to speed.
Oh, I will set the stage, sure. For those of you who are like Zach, Zach.
Sorry, man, I'm so sick of politics.
These races are so high stakes, it's unbelievable. Where right now, the Senate is essentially 48 Democrat, 50 Republican. And so if Democrats win both of these seats, it becomes 50-50, and then the Vice President, Kamala Harris, will be the tiebreaker. So you go from Republican control of the Senate and Mitch McConnell as the majority leader, who gets to decide what gets voted on and doesn't get voted on, to Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, demote Mitch McConnell to the minority, and then you have a really different landscape in terms of what can happen out of Washington. And let's jump to the biggest example of this, which is cash relief, and then we'll come back to the Georgia race. So right now, as we're having this conversation, we are approximately 5 senatorial votes shy of approximately 180 to 200 million Americans getting $2,000 each. Actually, it's higher, because I saw the total dollar amount. It's something, because it's a more expansive definition this time, it's something like 237 million Americans getting $2,000 each. There are literally 5 human beings standing in the way of that happening. and it's infuriating. It boggles my mind. There are times when I think to myself, I can't believe we're this close to this happening. And then most of the time, I'm like, I can't believe this is not happening, given how close it is, and that there are these 5 assholes, and you can just pick any 5. You know, where, like, imagine if you had the power to send out $2,000 to 237 million people, and you thought, no, let's not do that. Even though there's a pandemic, even though over 10 million jobs have been lost, even though there are food lines for miles, even though millions of Americans are facing evictions again during a pandemic. Let's not do that.
Yeah, every other country is doing it too. Developed country.
Yeah, like developed countries are doing the common sense thing, which is like, hey, stay home, and we should send you some money so you can stay home and you know, not be freaking out, not be stressed out, and not and not feel like you have to go out and work to survive. I mean, there are essential workers who we are very grateful for working, but there are a lot of folks who are somewhere in this like gray area where it's like, well, I don't have enough to survive, so I guess I have to go out there and look for business as my, you know, as like a, let's say, Uber driver or something like that. And
retail.
So retail. Well, yeah, retail. In some cases, non-essential. So. So we are this close, and the dynamic around cash relief, it is fascinating how it's developed. So I'm going to rewind for a minute, and listeners to the podcast know about like the main cash relief component. So I won't review that in depth. But this $2,000 a month proposal really got kickstarted by Donald Trump in a very, very big way. So it was floating around the Senate and the House. Had essentially settled on $600, which was previously zero. So there was part of me that was like, well, $600 sucks, but sure is a hell of a lot better than zero. And at $600 a head, it included dependents. So if you're like a single mom with 2 kids, you get $1,800. So like, you know, it wasn't zero, but, but sure, it wasn't as good as $2,000. So then Donald Trump comes out and says, this should be $2,000 a head. And then the politics of it shuffle. Now, to her great credit, and Chuck Schumer's great credit, the Democrats then just come out full bore and are like, heck yes, let's do it. like Trump says $2,000, and then the House is like, yeah, let's do it. And they hold an up or down vote on the $2,000, and this also is a huge credit to our representatives. 2/3 of the House approves the $2,000.
Even more goals. Holy shit.
In cash relief proposal, almost immediately, including dozens of Republicans. So you get like a real consensus in the House saying yes to $2,000. And then it goes to the Senate. And here's where it gets wild, is you have a handful of Republicans who come out and say, yeah, I'm on board with the $2,000. So it starts with Josh Hawley.
No!
The whole time. But then Marco Rubio comes out and says, I am for it. Then Lindsey Graham comes forward and says, I am for it. Then, and here's where Georgia comes into play. The 2 Georgia senators who know that their political career is like neck and neck on the line, come out and say, I'm for it too. You know? So at this point, you have 5 Republican senators. You have virtually all of the Democrats. So you're at like 53 or so. And then to make it filibuster proof, you need to get to 60. And then there were 2 other senators that also came out for it. So you're about 5 votes away. And that's the picture as it stands right now as we're talking. Mitch McConnell.
Oh my god. I gotta see this.
Hey everybody, Happy New Year. This is really weird because it's been a while, far too long, longer than I expected. Yeah, I'm not going to get into it here because there's just too much. I'm going to do another video and I'll talk all about the new space for recording, some of the frustrations of. I have watched this intro about a dozen times while trying to get my other camera and other audio device to work, and get all the work with OBS and fucking couldn't. So yeah, that's certainly different than Voice of Trespass. I like that little floor tom work. Nice little 5. Yeah. That was hip as hell.
God damn.
Yeah, dude, what the fuck? No!
Chris!
What is that, 7? 9 maybe? I don't know. You know me. I don't even know where one's at. Yeah, get into those effects. Yeah, dude, he's left foot leading. That's badass, dude. Dude, his parts are so arranged, so orchestrated. I'm curious, like how much room he actually gives himself to improvise in some of these songs. Is that a Dirk Blast? Oh, here he goes. There he goes. See, so like, in the time since I first watched him, I've followed him on Instagram and I've watched his Twitch streams and stuff. And so it's funny to like watch this dude like play blast beats, because the only other time I've seen him really play blast beats is to like Cyndi Lauper songs on his Twitch stream, or like on random ass like 80s music streams, and he'll like throw in a blast on a Duran Duran song or something. Dude. Yeah. Throwing that little thrash. It's like a all over the place. I think he's covered every time signature, every metric modulation within each time signature. I think He keeps having to fix his fucking mic. Oh no, busted it again. I was in a band that was like kind of prog. It was like a prog punk band. And this reminds me of that, where it's just like collections of sections of music that you string together in really crazy ways. These guys are a lot better than we were though. See how he set that up with that triplet fill right there. That's all. That's big band shit. But you got to set up what you're about to do with what you're playing beforehand. So it gives you that little triplet fill.
Punk Blast, I love that.
See that those double stops.
Double stop. What the hell is that? It's on a string instrument.
What is this? You guys are fucking silly, dude. Is this Beetlejuice?
I see that, yeah.
That was a funny break, man. All right, camera. Let's get something that we can actually watch. Dude, these guys are hilarious. Hey, 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 hey. How random. We got this little, I guess, drags, little single voiceovers. Gotta, yeah, see, the left hand's got to do work on the toms, so the right hand's got to come over to get the hi-hat. You little fucker.
I hate that part.
Beautiful. And the retard here. I love how he uses his floor tom.
The scent of anime betrays your presence inside condition more important. Turn back.
Dude, how do you remember all that shit, bro? You remember all that shit. Dudes in bands, they smoke too much pot to remember all that shit. At least dudes in the bands I was in did. Anyway, so yeah, just trying to get back into the groove of doing stuff. I'll make another video and tell you all about what's going on behind me and where I've been and what I've been doing. But for now, Happy New Year. Be safe. Have as much fun as you can without being dangerous or giving other people a deadly disease. I'd appreciate it. So with yeah, be well. See you next time. All right, here we go. Going for some more reactions. Full discretion, I'm going to be honest with you. I watched this before months ago. Months ago, I recorded and did a whole reaction, and the audio was jacked. So I thought I could refilm another one right then and there, but it wouldn't be fresh in my mind, you know? So I'm going to just do it now that it's months later. And I think a lot of you have wanted to see Spencer Pruitt, so we're going to get into it. Let's watch some Spencer Pruitt playing with Archspire. Let's click that. Click it. Drum. Oh, that's right. He does this. He's got this whole thing going on. That's right, yeah, the bells. The bells, I think I remember popping for. Ah, the fours! Gravity Blast. Yeah, it's like a Dirk Blast, but it's fours instead of threes. Fucking awesome. How, dude? Fucking how do you do Gravity Blast that? Well, I know how. You practice. I always ask, how do you do that? You just fucking practice. What are you talking about? Yeah. What? Fucking jacked up. So are it's like sleight of feet. It's like sleight of feet happening.
Not sleight of hand, but sleight of feet. All the bells, man. All you need is a whistle. Oh man, they didn't sync that. Alright. Funny edit there. Oh, there he goes, all of them. I love the fours, the floor blast, whatever the fuck that is. Tell me what that is. He's just dancing.
For those of you who don't know the Alright. Now it's starting to resemble a blast beat a little bit. Only thing left to do is add in double kick, which is gonna do the same thing than the snare.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, gotta stay together. Hell no. shit.
The scent of anima betrays your presence inside perdition, mortal. Turn back.
Think you can make it. Maybe. Nope. Fuck that. Yeah.
The scent of anima betrays your presence inside perdition, mortal. Turn back. betrayed your presence inside perdition hall, mortal. Turn back.
No! Helpless Vessel? Oh, you mean a porn star? Nah, it was kind of dark. Didn't sound as bad in my head for some reason. I mean, that's one good thing about OnlyFans is that they've really stuck a dagger in the porn industry. Do it. Yeah. Should have done that. shit. Right here. Ah. Fuck. Even hard and classic. What the fuck? Okay.
Motion detected at the front door.
Really? Oh, wait. You have to light it up. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, relax, I guess. Wait. What? ACAB. Guild name. That. powerful. Guess what's coming back today? I said a minute okay. Oh.
He's a regular part of the show. You know him from Get Your News On with Ron. It's Ron Placone. Hey, Ron, how are you?
What's up, Jimmy? Happy New Year. And look, this is the United States.
Perfect name.
Nobody should be telling anybody to go fuck themselves unless it's the vice president doing it. All right? Dick Cheney made the rules. We follow them.
Oh, my God, that's right. He did that on the floor.
Yeah.
He did it on the Senate floor. Told people to go F themselves. Well, here we go. Let's get into the story. So, it's, by the way, the lighting looks fantastic on your show now.
Oh,
Look
yeah.
at that. I don't know, would you get another light?
It might be the daylight, but we'll see. I mean, I did make some rearrangements.
Is that what it is? You got daylight coming in?
It might just be daylight, yeah.
Oh, well, it looks great. All right, so we got to do the show during the day now. I remember we had Max Blumenthal out one time, and as we started the interview, the sun was over here, and it started to like it was just a sliver. He had like a curtain open, and so the sliver kept moving across his face. It's very slowly. Anyway, all right, let's get to what happened, Ron. You saw what happened, so we've been pushing hashtag Force to Vote. What is hashtag Force to Vote? The Democrat progressives, just a couple of votes. If they withhold them from Nancy Pelosi, she can't become speaker. So we're telling them to demand a hashtag Force to Vote for Medicare for All. Nancy, if you want their votes to become speaker, you have to agree to bring up Medicare for All for a vote on the floor in the middle of a deadly pandemic. They weren't asking for anything before we came up with this idea, Ron. You know that? People go, well, they just disagree on strategy. You guys didn't have a strategy. They had no strategy. No one was extracting a vote for anything for their vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. So this idea that the DSA has a different strategy, they don't have a strategy. This idea that AOC and the squad had a different strategy, there was no strategy. No one was ever going to think about extracting anything for their vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker until Jimmy Dore Show brought it up. And so if they got a problem with this strategy, I want to know what their strategy is. And you know what their strategy is? Nothing. DSA has no strategy. AOC has no strategy. You know what? Who it does? The Jimmy DSA has strategy. That's right. The Jimmy DSA.
I like that.
I like that. So that's the kind of thing that's crazy making. And so they weren't extracting anything.
okay.
And AOC engaged Justin Jackson, and she came up with a bunch of bad reasons why she wouldn't do it, and everyone saw through them. So then she went and did a sweetheart interview, a softball interview on The Intercept with Jeremy Scahill, where he didn't know how to ask a follow-up question. And that it didn't stop. She thought that would put out the fire. It didn't. It just that keeps trending and trending. And so finally, she came out with this. And Ryan Grimm ran from The Intercept, which they have a nice sweetheart access deal with AOC and the squad. So here it is. He comes out to run a little interference for her. He says progressives in the House have won a rules change that would allow Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, or other big-ticket agenda items to be exempted from PAYGO. This was a necessary step in opening the way for it. Well, what the point of this is to get people off the tail of the squad to do #Force the Vote. But unwittingly, I think, Ryan, what he's doing here is actually making the case for #Force the Vote, because now we've got rid of the hurdles that would stop it, and now so we could just go do it. We could do Medicare for all. We could do the Green New Deal. We could do other big ticket items. So what they're trying to do is say, look, that's what they negotiated. They got something for their vote. That's garbage. That actually makes it more reasonable that they do #Force the Vote. Would you agree with that, Ron?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, and I think like your interview with Ben, you guys kind of summed up the level of win that it was, and yeah, because it applies to COVID or climate, which I think it's kind of sad. Just on a side note, where it's like, where our government is just like, okay, we'll spend some money if humanity's at stake. I mean, if the climate is going to completely collapse, we'll do something. Or I know this pandemic really sucks. If there's a little bit of something we have to do, we'll do that. There's your exemption. We're like, yeah!
That's exactly. Well, here's what Dave Dayen says. He says, I don't really see Medicare for all impacted by these changes.
Yeah, because you need to make the case that it's connected to COVID.
Yeah. So that's it. So you'd have to make the case that if you did a healthcare thing, it was connected to COVID, right? Okay.
Yeah, which those are easy dots to connect, but
right. So here's what she came out. So she retweeted Ryan Grimm. This was not coordinated. So she retweeted Ryan Grimm. She says, one of the first votes I ever cast broke with my party over House rules that strangled transformative legislation for working class people and climate. It was honestly terrifying. The first vote that she cast was for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, just so you know. The first vote AOC did in Congress was going against her campaign promise to Glenn Greenwald that she would not vote for leadership. She did vote for leadership. She voted for Nancy Pelosi. That was her first act, her first vote. Now, maybe her second vote, she says, one of my first votes. You only get one first. Hey, where's your third first vote? You only get one. One of my first votes? No, you only get one first. And that was for Nancy Pelosi. So then you follow one of the early votes, not first, early votes. She broke with her party, and it was honestly terrifying. Really terrifying? Come on. That you mean doing the thing we sent you to do? The thing that you couldn't wait to do? The thing you said you wanted to cause a ruckus?
That she gets health care
That she gets health care for? Now the Congressional Progressive Caucus has pushed these critical rule changes in the House negotiations. I'm grateful for Representative McGovern's leadership. So they're trying to do a head fake. So this is the head fake. Look, this is what we got for our supporting Nancy Pelosi. As we just had Ben Spielberg on, he said that's nothing. That's basically nothing they got. And it is basically nothing. Ryan Grimm's trying to make it sound like it is something. It isn't. But they've got that straight open door policy with AOC to come on their podcast whenever they want. So that's why they do this. But this is crazy. So this is what they're going to try and pull. So tomorrow, AOC is going to stand up and say Nancy Pelosi's name into a camera to vote for her. That's happening. That's what. And then, so here's the bad part. No, so that's we expected something like this. We expected a bullshit thing like this, and we got it. But here's the part that's in the headline of this video clip. Here's the part that you've been waiting for. She said that, and then she said this. She said, and to be 100% honest, and she put an emoji there, the 100% part, and to be 100% honest. So whenever someone starts off a tweet with, and to be 100% honest, and they make the extra effort to get an emoji in there, you know some bullshit is coming your way. And here it comes. She goes, it was hard during this to be targeted and marred as some sellout enemy of the people over a late tactical disagreement over one floor vote. You mean you couldn't take the heat from a fucking YouTube comedian? This is what the thing that was hard for you? A YouTube comedian yelling in his garage in Pasadena about the thing that you campaigned on? That was what was hard? No, what was hard was that we sniffed you out and we're shining a light on the fact that you're abandoning the people right now. And you're not doing what you can do. And you're lying. You're going against the campaign promise. So, and then she totally diminishes it by calling it over one floor vote. Before she was in Congress, she was screaming we needed a floor vote for Medicare for all. I'll show you those videos in a second. But this was her signature issue, and she demanded a vote while she was campaigning. And now that we got it, she goes, it's just a tactical disagreement over one floor vote. Does anyone not see through this? Ryan Grimm doesn't, but does anyone else not see through this? I mean, besides people at The Intercept. But everybody else does, right? Right? And here it comes. Here comes the big part. She says, also a bummer to see figures excuse comments like F her and F anyone who protects her. That's not tone, that's violence. She's equating speech with violence. Someone saying F off or F her, she's saying that's violence. And let me just say, I get called all kinds of things all the time, every day. They impugn my character. They say I'm taking money from foreign dictators. They say I'm a right-winger. They say I'm this. They say I'm a... They say every unbelievably horrible thing. They put my house in a paper. They tweet that out. What else? What haven't they done to me? And I'm not an elected official. I'm just a YouTube host. I have no power. And you're going to play, I'm going to play the world's smallest violin for you. Someone said F off to a congressperson? And you're going to call that violence? Do you know what that does? That demeans people who are actually victims of actual violence. I would never call what's been happening to me the last 3 weeks on Twitter violence. Or what they've been printing in the newspaper, or what people have been doing on videos. People have been screaming into cameras saying they want to take me and beat me up in a parking lot. But somehow, one of the most powerful people in the world with 10 million Twitter, 11 million Twitter followers, and $100,000 speaking fees, somehow she's a victim of me? She's a victim of violence. So this is the Hillary Clinton trope. This is the Bernie bros are mean. Bernie bro said something mean. That's what she's doing. AOC gets called horrible things on a daily basis by people on the right and people who don't like her, just like me. They say racist, sexist things about her, and it doesn't bother her. But being called a sellout by another progressive is bothering her so much that she's complaining about it on Twitter. Right-wingers say the most disgusting things to her all day long, and she beats their ass back on Twitter. But I'm calling her out accurately, and that is causing her real consternation. Do you see what's happening? It's the proper thing to do, and it's working. Maybe being called a sellout is bothering her to the point that she's now complaining about it on Twitter. Maybe, just maybe, that's because she knows #ForceTheVote is the right thing to do, and she has a bit of a guilty conscience. I don't know if it's a guilty conscience, but she's smart enough to know she's being revealed. There's a spotlight on her not doing what she said she was going to do, and she doesn't like it. And she's going to do every underhanded, cheap thing in the world to try to get out of it, including try to intimate that I'm some kind of a maniac doing violence instead of a maniac who's just yelling in his garage. I'm a pissed off constituent who helped you get elected. That's what I am. And if you can't take swear words, well, here's what I say. Translation, I'm voting for Nancy Pelosi again without doing what I repeatedly promised I'd do. Fight for Medicare for all and force the vote. There will never be a better time to do this. I know it's immoral to not leverage power in this historic moment. Too bad Bernie bros are mean. And do you want to know how I know that this is bullshit garbage and that she's lying? She's not just gaslighting. She's lying. To get out of this. Because they got caught having no strategy. And they got caught not rolling over for the establishment again. They got caught. And so that's why she's doing this underhanded, creepy shit.
Oh!
And you want to know how I know it's garbage? Because here's Rashid Tlaib. Here's how they talk about other politicians.
People love you, and you win. Woo! And when your son looks at you and says, Mama, look, you won, bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't. Because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach the motherfucker.
So Rashid Tlaib says we're going to impeach that motherfucker, and apparently that's not violence. Look at the violence she's committing. She said motherfucker. And then here she is outside at a big rally in the middle of daylight, and she gets the crowd to say it. Watch this. She gets the crowd, not only her saying it in her garage, she's out in public in a park screaming it into a microphone with a loudspeaker, and she tries to get everybody else to say it. Watch this.
Impeach them!
Impeach the MF. There it is. And I don't have a problem with that, by the way. They can do that all day long. I don't care. I don't have a problem with that. You call the most powerful guy in the country an MFer? Go ahead. New Congress member creates stir by saying
oh my God,
impeach the MFer. Rashid Tlaib went there right away. Okay, there it is. But guess what? Ocasio-Cortez jabs the GOP's full outrage over Congresswoman's profane speech.
Oh.
So when they do it, and you get upset, it's full outrage. But when I do it, it's violence. Literal violence. Full outrage is only acceptable when you want the Progressive Caucus to do something that would make their colleagues uncomfortable. So here's from that article, from the Washington Post article. You want to see this? Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came to the defense of Rashid Tlaib, denouncing what she called full outrage over profane language Tlaib used while calling the president for President Trump's impeachment. Republican hypocrisy at its finest, saying that Trump admitted to sexual assault on tape is just locker room talk, but scandalizing themselves into faux outrage when my sis says a curse word in a bar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wrote. GOP lost entitlement to policing women's behavior a long time ago. Wow. Speaking directly to Rashid Tlaib, Ocasio-Cortez asked, I got your back. So isn't she doing the exact same thing she was accusing Republicans of doing, of having full outrage over swear words in a bar? Isn't that what she's doing, the exact same thing? So now you're outraged at swear words on a Zoom meeting? Here is the chairman of the California Democratic Party, or the guy who was running this meeting. I don't know if this was actually, I think it might have been, though. This is when we took over the California Democratic Party, the Progressives did, and they had super delegates at the state level, so they canceled out what we did. They could just get rid of it. And so the Progressives were making a stink, including the nurses. And watch what they said to the nurses.
Hey, shut the fuck up or go outside, all right?
Oh.
And people cheered. He told progressives and nurses who were protesting, shut the fuck up or go outside. And everyone cheered. That's violence, though, according to AOC. She really stepped in at this time. And here's Ro Khanna, who came on our show to address this very point of AOC being a snowflake like this, and using the woman kind, falsely using and disingenuously using this bullshit card of violence is happening to me because someone's in their garage. A constituent is yelling about me not doing what I campaigned on. Here's what Ro Khanna says about that.
I'd say, Jimmy, I still believe in the First Amendment. I still believe that the press isn't supposed to be friends with politicians, that you're supposed to ask tough questions. I go on Fox News. I go on other places. And you know, there was a conference called the House Democrats, and I never leak, and I don't think people should be leaking, but it was all woe is me. And I said, look, being a United States congressman is like being in the 0.0000001% of privilege of humanity. You're in an extraordinary level of privilege. So if you're going to have tough questions from the press, or you're going to have someone say something not
oh my God,
deal with it, get over it. There's real people with real problems. So I think it's great. I mean, if people over at my team are saying, why are you going on Jimmy Dore? I said, because he's a journalist. He asks tough questions, and if you can't answer it, then you should be in some other line of work.
So that's Ro Khanna kind of pouring some water on AOC histrionics or hysterics. I don't know what the word is. I'm not smart enough. I'm a jagoff.
I mean, hysterics works. That works.
I mean, you're so now when people are actually a victim of violence, you're ruining it for them. It's just like when they called Bernie Sanders a sexist. Remember when they all did that? Elizabeth Warren did that. Bernie Sanders is a sexist. So now when there's actually a sexist, it doesn't. Now you've ruined it. You're the boy who cried wolf. So what AOC is doing is being the boy who cried wolf, right, Ron? Would you say?
Well, yeah, and you know, when I was thinking about it earlier today, I kind of thought, man, what a weird time we live in, where we have higher civility expectations for comedians and creators than we do for elected officials. But then I thought about it further, and I'm like, you know, in other ways, this is really nothing new when you go back in history. You know, when neoliberalism was just starting to be on the rise, you know, it sort of just passively really crept in a bunch, but people were really talking about 7 words that George Carlin was using.
Yeah.
You know, later on in the 90s, when Bill Clinton was dismantling the media and doing these horrific trade deals and all kinds of other things we're still feeling the disastrous effects from. People were kind of just passively letting that go because he was a cool guy with the saxophone. But a lot of people were really upset about Marilyn Manson lyrics. And here we are yet again, and I think it's time as a society to rethink our priorities.
Yeah. 45,000 people a year die from lack of health care. That's violence. Nobody ever died from someone telling a politician to go F themselves.
Bingo.
Everybody, and I guess it's a very selective line of morality. You can say F you to some politicians, but to other politicians, it's violence. Like, here's Robert De Niro.
I'm going to say one thing. Fuck Trump.
He says it like he's the first person who thought of it.
Whoever thought of that. And he says it on live television, and everybody cheers.
He's been in office for 2 years. No one's ever come up with this one. Hear me out.
Stephen Colbert says "fuck you" to President Trump. So if they disagree with the president, it's okay. And then AOC goes on his show all the time. I don't think she's accused of, hey, quit doing violence to other politicians. Do you think she said that? Look at this. America's nice guy, Jim Gaffigan, hilarious comedian. Love Jim Gaffigan. He says America's nice guy finally says "fuck you" to Trump supporters on Twitter. And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't say F you to a politician's supporters. I would say F you to the system that gave them such poor choices. That's where we go. But I get what he's doing. But again, everybody does this. The point, and I'm not against. Jim Gaffigan should be allowed to do that however long he wants to do, how many times he wants to do it. I have a different view. I would go after the system, but whatever. You're allowed to do that. He's not committing violence against Trump voters. It's not. Everybody does this all the time. Want to hear Bill? Listen to Bill Maher.
You heard what she said? Now, they fined CBS $1 million. $1 million for Janet Jackson's nipple. Think what they could get for Hillary Clinton's cunt.
Is that guy committing violence? Or is that a raunchy joke? That's a distasteful, raunchy joke. And look, that's a conservative. You want to see them all laugh? Look at it. They're all laughing. Look at. You heard them all laughing. You heard them all laughing. Here's Louis Black. And what I've said about Louis Black, I love Louis Black. I like him a lot. He's a great comedian. Nice guy. Is that he screamed at the top of his lungs. That was his whole gig, that he would foam at the mouth and scream. And no one got upset. No one said he was doing violence. Why? Because he wasn't really challenging power in a way that we are. Damn. Here's what he said. Nobody ever made a stink out of this. Watch this.
Turn to the left, and Mitch McConnell. If I'm ever near that fucking son, I'm in a punch. I mean, you know, we're not supposed to be violent in what we say anymore.
Yeah,
that son of a bitch, I'm gonna punch in the face. I mean it. Besides, not his politics. I don't give a shit about it. I turned to my mother and said, "Would you like your photo taken with Dick Cheney?" I'm not getting my photo taken with that son of a bitch. Never. And then she says, and besides that, there was John McLaughlin of the McLaughlin Group was sitting 15 feet away. And she says, I got to get over to that son of a bitch and tell him what a turd he is.
That's violence. That's all violence. That's what he's describing. Wow. Here's Samantha Bee, Hillary voter. Here's how she talks to other women. She's talking about Donald Trump's daughter.
Americans are finally paying attention. Well, most of us. Ivanka Trump, who works at the White House, chose to post the second most oblivious tweet we've seen this week. You know, Ivanka, that's a beautiful photo of you and your child, but let me just say, one mother to another, do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless c***. He listens to you.
So this idea that anybody else talks differently than Jimmy Dore is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Okay? I could do this all day long. I could show it over and over and over. I could show you Louis Black and Bill Maher and Samantha Bee. I could show you and Stephen Colbert. I could show you over and over and over. And the reason why I connect with people is because I say outwardly what people feel inwardly. Here's Nina Turner to back me up on that. Here's what Nina Turner says about Jimmy Dore.
Jimmy Dore say stuff that I can't say,
I know.
So he my alter ego.
All right, I see you.
Jimmy Dore's my alter ego. He says things I can't say. Want to hear that again? I do.
Jimmy Dore say stuff that I can't say,
I know.
So he my alter ego.
All right, I'll see you in a little bit. Thank you so much.
Hey, voting for Nancy Pelosi without demanding something in return is violence. In the middle of a deadly pandemic and an economic depression that nobody's ever experienced. That's violence. I lost my employer-provided insurance in March. Now I'm rationing my meds. I endure excruciating pain while waiting tables at a restaurant that doesn't offer benefits to part-time workers. That is violence. AOC, that's violence. Comrade Misty, she says, Sarcasm Starter says, oh, F off. 45,000 people die every year from lack of health care. That is violence. I agree. And you can tell politicians to fuck off. Especially when they're lying to you. You know what else is a bummer? Dying of cancer because you can't afford a doctor. So she says, she was saying, also a bummer to see figures excuse comments like F her and F anyone who protects her. That's not tone, that's violence. He says, you know what else is a bummer? Dying of cancer because you can't afford a doctor. Do you see how she's wrapped up in her own problems and not yours? Do you see the Obamification of AOC happening right in front of your eyes? Because I do. Glenn Greenwald sees it. Ron, do you see it?
I do see it, and you know what? Here's just kind of a general summary here, since there's a new year upon us. If you are more upset by the word fuck than you are that we live in an economy based on war, and we don't have the healthcare system other countries have figured out decades ago, well, it's a new year. It's time to rethink your take on the world.
Time to rethink what offends you.
Yeah.
If AOC thinks mean tweets are violence, what does she think appropriating $30 million to overthrow Venezuela is? Because that's what was just in that last bill they voted for. $30 million to overthrow Venezuela. Isn't that violence? That you're a part of? No, what's violence? These are all people coming back at AOC for trying to pretend that she's a victim of some comedian's words. That she's a victim of violence because I'm calling her out. Do you see how desperate she is? Do you see how this works? Because I'm accurately calling her out? I'm not ad hominem. I'm calling her out. You're selling out. You're abandoning the people. You're selling out your own campaign promises right now. That's called a sellout. And that's what AOC is doing. And she's going to get up tomorrow and look right in the camera and say, I vote for Nancy Pelosi without getting you anything, and that's a sellout, and I'm going to keep calling her a sellout because I know it bothers her. It bothers her. You know what doesn't bother her? All those horrible names and racist things that the right wing says about her. That doesn't bother her. You know what does bother her? When you accurately call out when she's a sellout, and she's selling you out tomorrow. When you see this video, she probably will have already sold you out. She's going to get up, look in the camera, and say, I vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker without getting anything for you. In the middle of a deadly pandemic, in the middle of the biggest economic crisis you've ever lived in your life. And I'm not just saying her, but she's the one who's taking this fight on. I'm talking to all of them. Ro Khanna should be doing this. Jamal Bowman should be doing this. Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Mark Pocan. Anybody who considers themselves a progressive. They should be strategizing, and they're not. You know what they're strategizing to do? To not help you. They're trying to figure out a way to get out of doing this. You know what? What's violence is you making excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse. This time, bad words equal violence. For not doing the bare minimum that's expected of you and hashtag forced to vote. And for kicking down at those that are punching up at you. When I come at AOC, I'm punching up. She's the most popular member of Congress with the most power, and she's powerful. I'm a jagoff comedian in my garage. I got no power. Except the truth. Whatever power the truth has, I have that. And that was enough to make her flip out and start flailing. And start gaslighting and lying at a nuclear speed. And now she's telling you, I'm selling you out tomorrow. We're done. I'm not ever crossing Nancy Pelosi on this. Johnny Graz? Go ahead, Brian.
I want to mention about that person's tweet. You know, they point out something that I think a lot of times we lose sight of. This is not some crazy ask.
No.
I mean, this is a very, 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 very reasonable ask. And you know, when you see these Twitter threads, which I know we've all been, you know, spending a good amount of time on Twitter, like, people in other countries are looking at this and they're just going, what's the problem? Of course they should do this. How are you guys? This is a no-brainer. How are you guys not have what we have?
In the middle of a deadly pandemic, how is this controversial? How is someone accusing you of using words are violence if you're just pressuring them to do what they said they were going to do when they got there? That's desperate. That's someone who's scared. This is working. Keep pressuring her. Keep calling her office. Keep tweeting at her. Keep letting AOC know that we see what she's doing. And we're going to hold her accountable because we're her constituents. And so she tweeted this out, right? She tweets out, and to be 100% honest, could there be a bigger garbage lead up to a fucking bullshit thing? It was during this time. Johnny Graz says, this is the tweet in which AOC completes her journey from standard bearer to standard barrier. Whoa, Ron, you didn't write that. Aren't you a little jealous?
That's very clever wordplay. Hats off to Johnny Graz.
You'd think it'd get more likes and 351. That should be doing well. It's getting. I bet it's being suppressed. Suppressing tweets that's violence.
Well, folks are seeing it now in real time. They can go over, give it a like.
That's violence. Suppressing tweets is violence. What's more violent than denying health care in the middle of a deadly pandemic while watching 346,000 people die? Oh, right. The F word. Boy, did AOC not think this one through. These are women calling her out. I have never physically recoiled in disgust at a tweet before this one. And Graham L. Elwood weighs in on AOC and says, "Are you sure you're from the Bronx? You sound like some rich kid crybaby." That's exactly what she sounds like. So there you go. There's AOC. Again, gaslighting, lying, and now she's obfuscating and trying to use the term. She's trying to paint herself as a victim of a YouTube comedian telling her to F off. It's pathetic. The progressive movement is pathetic. There is no movement. Bernie Sanders threw it away, got nothing for it. AOC is going to vote for Nancy Pelosi without getting anything. The squad's going along. What are they doing? What have Ron? I'm not kidding. What have they done? It's one of those things where they'll allow the squad to vote against something that it doesn't make a difference, right? Like you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, well, and this kind of gets back to what you and Ben were talking about earlier. I mean, there's these kind of like small optics things where it's like, okay, that's not a bad thing, that could help, but if you're not going to do anything with it, then what's the point? Okay, so we have these exemptions for PAYGO. All right, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. But if we're not going to do something with that, like, I don't know, say, let's get a vote on healthcare in a pandemic, then what's the point?
You know, I just got a text. Someone named Red Ryan tweeted out. I forgot this. Do you know that Alexander AOC tweeted out when John McCain died?
Oh, yes.
She said, John McCain's legacy represents an unparalleled example of human decency and American service. As an intern, I learned a lot about the power of humanity in government through his deep friendship with Senator Kennedy. He meant so much to so many. My prayers are with his family. But, so then Red Robin says, according to AOC, a war criminal like John McCain's legacy was an example of human decency, but her left-wing critics are violent. That speaks volumes. You are correct. I'm going to give that a retweet. And I'm just sick and tired of people saying we have to organize more for this. No, the moment is here now. We're in the middle of a deadly pandemic. It has overwhelming support. Majority of Republicans are for Medicare for all. 90% of Democrats are for Medicare for all. 72% of the country's for it. The time is now. The organizing has been done. It's all done. We did it. It's done. It's done. And now we need to force a vote and primary the fuckers who don't go for it. That's it. It's all done. This shit that we have to go convince more people is ridiculous. Ron, do you agree with me on this?
Oh, big time. And we can look into other countries.
It's a Ray, right? I don't know. Is that what I'm thinking of? What? Yep, that's what I need. Wait, there. Oh, it was linear equation. No. What is it, like 3 more to do? Let's try him. Oh man, that's powerful. Uh-oh. Yeah. Oh, fuck no. No! Come on. Right there. Right there. Fuck. Back up. Fuck! Oh God, you bitch. All right. Time to relax. Calm down. Just too slowly. I think I got it. Should just be able to walk right through. Probably not. Or not. There's two more over there. Nice. A mimic. And a mimic. Ah, you funny. Nice. I like how it doesn't look like a normal mimic. You can talk. Yeah, Jasmine's probably the best option. Well, I think I can do it. Fucking go. Okay. Oh my god! Fuck! What? Try again. Well, that sucked.
Could you speak?
Yeah, what's up?
All right, it went away now. Give me a sec.
Nice. Okay, wait. Can you? Is there a delay between me speaking and you hearing me?
All right. Now it's working. Okay.
So you can hear me just fine?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. There doesn't seem to be much of a delay. That's nice. How you doing?
All good. Thank you for having me on. It's not a Discord chat if there aren't at least some technical issues, at least in my experience.
Yeah, of course. It's,
All right.
it's the aesthetic flourish. It's necessary.
Yeah. So, should we? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a bit of a delay. Let's hope that sorts itself out.
Well, you're on the other side of the world. What's the expected delay for folks that are that far away? It's probably like at least a little bit of time, right?
Yeah, but right now it seems okay.
Okay.
It's not too bad.
We'll live with it. All right.
All right.
What inspired you to talk to me? People usually don't go from making hit piece videos on me to opening up the conversation. Not to say I don't appreciate it. I love talking to people. But what inspired the change?
Sure thing. Yeah. Just before we start, just one thing. The volume on mine is all right, I hope.
Yeah, and I can adjust it on my end. You sound good.
All right, perfect. All right, so I guess I'll introduce myself and then answer your question. My name is Hakeem. I am a physician by profession, but I make random YouTube videos just, well, for the fun of it, really. Generally, I make videos on Marxist topics, history related, on, occasionally response videos, stuff like that. So, the perspective, I guess, that I had when going into this was, I realized that maybe response videos or just like back and forths wouldn't help. Just generally, I didn't want to make it like a drama thing, if that makes sense. I wanted to see that, or in my opinion, I think that you and I probably agree on way more than we disagree on. And most of what we disagree on is probably just either misunderstandings on each other's parts, or just errors in communication, or things that can be cleared up with a discussion, basically. So I thought, why not actually just reach out? We can have a conversation, and we can, I can give you my perspective. You can give me your perspective, of course, like my perspective being an Iraqi Arab, your perspective being a Euro-American person from California, I believe.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah, all right. But yeah, so I guess if there is such a big difference between coastal and Midwest and like opinions, maybe there is. You'd know better than I would. That's the point of the discussion. So we can, I can get more of your perspective, you can get more of my perspective, and then we can reach kind of like not necessarily a middle point, but an understanding of each other that is far less toxic and far more productive than what was occurring before. I hope.
Yeah, not many people are familiar with the nuances of Kropotkinism, Californianism, so I'm happy to share my perspective and experiences. Well, you typed some stuff up you wanted to talk about, but I'll hand the floor to you. I think. Give us a subject. What do you want to? What discourse do you want to engage in? I mean, obviously we have the content of the videos that were made previously. I didn't watch your second video. I think I skimmed through the timestamps. I saw the first one.
Go on.
Did you want to rehash those topics, or did you just want to start with a
No,
given subject?
I think it's more productive for our parts because the videos are there. It's fine. I think we can just set the theory aside and just talk about just the beliefs or at least understandings on each other's parts.
Oh, you're gonna get canceled, mate. All right.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, I guess then you know what? I'll just define myself. Okay. I used to call myself an anarchist, but I find there's a lot of contention about the specific definitions of anarchists and how much it pertains to strategy rather than baseline principle. I just call myself a libertarian socialist now, which I find is a more accurate descriptor. I also think it's rhetorically useful because libertarianism is usually associated with capitalism. So to describe myself as a libertarian while being a leftist usually makes it easier if I'm arguing with a right-leaning person to confuse them, or they say something dumb and I get to correct them. So that's usually fun. And that's generally how I come at things.
All right, fair enough. I'd say that my personal perspective is that of a Marxist-Leninist, but when it comes to the concept, the idea of libertarianism, some people might find it a bit funny, but I share your views on that. I personally consider myself a libertarian too. When it comes to the pragmatism of what we have to do and whatnot, then sometimes the libertarianism of at least on my end, has to be dulled. But the things I think both of us would like let's say in an ideal world, if we could have a socialist revolution based on democratic participation, bloodless, based on a peaceful acquisition of power on the part of the working class, where everything is just transferred over and there's I don't want to say difficulties, there are always difficulties, but I mean that the ruling classes would give up their power willingly, or at least willingly enough so that there wouldn't have to be too much force being, used. There wouldn't have to be any bloodshed at all. Nobody would have to be dispossessed in any meaningful sense of the word, and everybody's rights would be respected. Not necessarily in the liberal, enlightenment sense, but more, let's say, in just a human rights sort of sense. That is my personal perspective, and that's what I would love. That's actually my ideal. And would I be correct in assuming that it's the same case for you?
Yeah, I've been practicing up to debate the bourgeois out of control over the means of production in the free marketplace of ideas. I mean, that's the ideal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the conversation that I want to enter into, and I think this is just a generally interesting topic, is the reform and revolution. Not reform versus revolution, because I think that is an unfair dichotomy to put.
Come
I
on.
think people who are only for reform are wrong, and I think people who only put emphasis on revolution are equally wrong. I think that there is room for both of these to, depending on the local circumstances and the development of the state of class consciousness amongst the working class that is present wherever you are, as well as the readiness of the progressive forces wherever you are. Both are equally, in my opinion, valid options depending on the time and place, and most of the time let's say a timid approach towards both is a safe bet, so to speak, with emphasis on one or the other depending on your current position. Would I be also right in assuming that's your position as well?
Yes. I'm not so idealist as to believe there would ever be a point in time, or at least a likely point in time, where everything that we want done could ever be achieved without some kind of meaningful material conflict. My goal, or at least my hope, would be that we could achieve enough of a gain through reform that we could prompt the powers that be into action against us, in which case any revolutionary action would be retaliatory rather than instigatory, which would give us, at least optically, a pretty strong upper hand. I don't think there's much potential, certainly not in America. I mean, this could vary country to country, but in America, the idea of revolutionaries taking to the street and seizing the country is laughable. It's a joke. It's never, ever going to happen. But if things...
And I agree.
Right, and if things move further enough, far enough down the line, and maybe class consciousness spreads, and the average working class person in America is a little bit more aware of their material, relationship power, and we achieve enough, eventually maybe there's some a coup that's attempted, like the business plot back in 1920s America, and if we, oust that, then we kind of have an excuse or a means by which we can achieve more radical change.
That's a very interesting perspective, and there's an interesting parallel. I don't know if you personally read up on this, but the political approach of Arab nationalists and Arab socialists in the middle of the past century heavily, let's say, echoes what you just said, or you echo what they had done.
No, they learned from me. You were right the first time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's very interesting to know. Just a minor side note, it is almost midnight here, so my English can flip every once in a while. So excuse me if a word just sounds weird or something.
I speak to plenty of Americans who speak English worse than you. Don't worry about it.
Thank you very much. That, and also just a second point, just to general chat. My internet will most likely not be able to handle both streaming on Discord and also watching the stream and looking at the chat. So I will not be looking at the chat for now. If you have questions for me, then maybe we can get to them at the end. Otherwise, if you have any just direct questions, feel free to DM me on Twitter whenever. My DMs are always open, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. So yeah, so with that aside, I actually I appreciate your perspective, and I understand why you would give it in that way, because I fully agree with you. I think that the concept of revolution, or at least the attempting revolution, in any meaningful sense of the word, in the current imperial core, in the current, let's say, metropolitan, right? In the first, as much as I don't like the first, quote-unquote, first world countries, yeah, it would be laughable, like you said. That's actually a very apt way of putting it. Because not only are the working classes not really into that idea, maybe it would be opposite to their, it would contradict their direct interest, at least as of right now. And this is where I would like to kind of bring the discussion. I was hoping that you could give me your personal perspective on the development of, for example, sufficient class consciousness, or basically let's say the general strategy for a first world, highly wealthy nation like the United States. What you consider to be the correct course or order of things that is required to be done in order to reach basically, not necessarily a point of revolution, but at least seizure of state power by the working class, which I assume that is something that you desire as well.
Oh yeah. I guess my main issue, and this is particular to the United States, there are countries in Europe that aren't this cucked. But in the United States, union culture is dead. Unions are dead. There's just no unions. There are some unionized sectors of our working class, but they're often government workers, or the unions are so normalized and so institutionalized that they aren't even really considered bastions of working class power. So the problem is, at the end of the day, we need more people who are leftists. We need more people who are amicable to the interests of the working class. And there are two main ways to do that. You can either do that through the propagation of these ideas through policy, or through the organization, the natural organization of working class people. Unions would be an example of that. We haven't been succeeding. Unions have been dying for decades. Or through thought leaders. And the most common type of thought leader is politicians. We do have other thought leaders who aren't politically, who aren't elected officials, like your Jordan Petersons or your Steven Crowders, and for some reason they're always Canadians. But the problem is these people tend to come from money, and obviously money doesn't associate with our kind, at least not as readily.
That's true,
the only
yeah,
avenue
yeah.
we have to really get these big voices
education.
out there, I feel, is through political advocacy. And that's the reason why I invest myself in this electoral nonsense. I don't think the Democratic Party is going to achieve much in the way of working class reform. Maybe they're not as bad as Republicans, and I do believe that firmly. But in terms of moving us towards socialism, I don't think that's happening. But in 2015, something magical happened in this country, and that's that public opinion, and there are a million polls to substantiate this, public opinion on socialism, on working class politics, on everything associated with leftist advocacy surged because of Bernie Sanders. And this little known independent senator from Vermont ended up capturing the hearts of tens of millions of Americans. And of course he lost, but to go from an independent senator to the second runner-up behind Hillary Clinton, a DNC frontliner, in one election cycle, that's really, really impressive. And since then, public opinion on socialism and other left-leaning things, they've gone up significantly within the Democratic Party. My goal is not to use the Justice Dems, AOC, Ilhan Omar, whatever, as a means to achieve revolutionary action or even reform, but rather to abuse the soapboxes which come along with public office to advocate for left-leaning politics. And in so doing, we gain the opportunity to effect more meaningful change through the organic organization of working class peoples, through union creation, or through strikes, or through other forms of solidarity. But we can only do that if enough people agree with us. And I think that right now is probably the most effective way of going about it. We've had communist parties in this country for a century, standing on the sidewalk, handing out pamphlets, organizing meet and greets and get-togethers and homeless person resource acquisitions. These are great. They're good work. I'm not, besmirching them. I think it's wonderful what these people do, but they're not moving us any closer towards broad working class consciousness. We need something new, and that's my hope, that we can take advantage of this progressive surge in the Democratic Party.
That's actually very interesting. Yeah. I think I would more or less align with your position. The way I would talk about it, because there's a couple of points mentioned, that being not actual belief in electoralism, leading us to a socialist, or at least a working class acquisition of state power, but more to, like you said, use the microphones that these sort of political institutions usually have to put forth a message that will be heard and on and on. That's one point. The other point is the failure of let's say inviability. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say, of third parties, and the third point was working class organizations of some kind, like community organization. I mentioned this in my second video actually, and it's just something that I want to get your perspective on, because I assume that yes, you most likely do not. You don't want just the Democrats and that's it, and that's a very correct position to have, for them to just kind of play a very small part in an otherwise much larger, overarching, let's say, general strategy. But this is my perspective, I think, and as an American, I'm hoping you can comment on it. It's this. The idea of building a caucus, for example, within the Democrats, let's say one that is used to bring working class talking points to the floor, and to at least make these ideas more prevalent in society through use of media and whatnot. That could be one segment of this. But a caucus on its own will always be limited by the very fact that the Democrat Party is itself a capitalist like it's a capitalist institution that serves the needs and wants and desires of a particular section of the ruling class of the United States. So when we talk about caucus building, fair enough, okay, that could be one segment. In my mind, it would make sense to have, like, this is one part of the puzzle and it's missing two other bits, which I think you also agree with. Those two other bits being, for example, a working class organization of some form. It doesn't have to be a party, although ideally it would be a party, and I'll link this to the third party thing that we mentioned before. But it could be a party, let's say. And then the third aspect of this is working class, basically community organization that is connected to said working class, let's say, party, that does things, let's say, along the forms of what the Black Panthers did. Not exactly 100% just copy paste, but the general how do you call it? The spirit, that's the way of saying it, the spirit of what they were doing. And this caucus, which can destabilize the system internally, support both working class organizations and parties, because actually, here's a question for you, because maybe this wasn't entirely clear. Do you personally believe that the Democratic Party, when we tried, or when Americans tried to get it into power and whatnot, the point of doing so is to show that basically the inadequacy of said party for bringing about real change to the population and then bolstering more radical talking points. Do you agree with this generally?
Yes, very much. One of the big issues over the past 4 years is that our country is dying, and liberals just blame Trump. And Trump, I mean, to be fair, Trump is a terrible leader, but, like, a lot of the problems we're dealing with are much more institutional, and by giving them Trump as, like, an easy goat to burn, it prevents them, I think, from being more introspective about the nature of these issues.
Fair enough, yeah. So that's a very interesting point to note, because I personally think that I somewhat align on this point. And I would say, like, the idea of the caucus building, let's just take the viability of that on its own. Why not also develop working class organizations, like I mentioned, along with this electoral participation, but along numerous fronts. So not just along just one axis, but numerous axes. So you'd have, like, for example, a working class party, a caucus built up within the Democrats itself, disrupting the system, like I mentioned before, from the inside, and supporting the aims of the working class party, and working class organizations on their own, mutual aid groups and community organizations, again, in the spirit of Black Panthers and whatnot, all supporting each other in turn. So it is a general social movement that isn't left to the, let's say, upper echelons of political participation, but is throughout the whole system. So it's not purely grassroots, it's not purely part of this, establishment politics, but it has its roots in every bit of American society, if that makes sense to you. What would you say about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Black Panther Party was what got me into left politics to begin with. I read the assassination of Frederick Hampton, like, during my freshman year in college, and I was like, it gripped me. Yeah, the issue that so there are 2 points I'd like to make in response to that. The reason why I care so much about the Democrats is twofold. The first of which being, you can put progressives forward in the Democrats, you can't really in the Republicans, for a number of reasons. And secondfold, I do think that the Republicans are an existential threat to the future of the country. So I do consider it a virtue on its own just to keep Republicans from staying in office, for a number of reasons, like climate change being like a really, really obvious one. The Attorney General Barr was considering like sedition charges against Black Lives Matter protesters. I feel like it would take 1 or 2 Republican presidents to like get rid of democracy in this country, or whatever vestige of democracy we pretend to have, at least. So I do care a lot about that. But with regards to like the caucus, the Democratic caucus is very limited in its power. There's very, very, very little they can do, because ultimately AOC, let's just take AOC, her effectiveness is dictated by the extent to which she can get Democrats to believe, the voters, not the politicians, that she represents their interests. What that means, every time she takes a step against Pelosi, or every time she takes a step against the rest of the DNC, there's a risk that she's going to end up looking bad in the eyes of the voting population because she looks like an antagonist to the party. Party loyalty runs deep in this country, unfortunately. So caucuses are limited. What I want to see, and this is something that could only happen under a Democratic presidency, and maybe not even then, is the removal of the Electoral College and also first past the post, meaning that third parties could be, for the first time ever, really, viable in this country. If we could get, like, a functioning Green Party as a third party with a couple of seats in the Senate and in Congress, and they were capable of like swinging the Democratic vote, and they could extract concessions from the DNC, that would be more than we have ever managed to get from this country. And those people could be real leftists, or at the very least they could be like Bernie Sanders-esque sock dems who like signal socialism every time they open their mouth. That's what I dream of. But none of that should come at the expense of the development of organic working class organizations. I only wish that we had a country capable of allowing people to develop those relations. Unions can't function right now. And with the way our police state works, it'd be really, really, really difficult for like a Black Panther Party-esque thing to rise up again. People aren't willing to risk themselves the way they were back then. It's not the 60s anymore. I think we need something pivotal to change. And my hope is that we can extract something like that. Maybe a policy allowing unionization to be a little more viable, or third parties, and that could allow us to do much more meaningful work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. I'm actually, that's what I was hoping that you would say, because it shows, at least it shows to me that your understanding, I don't want to say it's very European, but because that might have some negative connotations, but the perspective that you have given is interesting, because essentially, if this is right, would you personally agree with a parliamentary system because you mentioned getting a first past the post voting, getting it taken away, like replacing it with a system where other parties become viable? Would you agree with a European parliamentary system being developed in the US, and that being a viable avenue for development of at least socialist policies, or at least social democrat policies at the very beginning?
Yeah, I think that'd be significantly better. Yeah, I mean, I think getting rid of the Senate and just having a parliamentary house would probably be an unfathomably positive change.
Oh, really?
For how the country operates. Yeah.
Never thought about that.
I don't think we can get rid of the Senate, I don't think we can get rid of the Senate without some pretty significant constitutional reform. But
yeah,
changing first past the post, I think we could do that without amending the Constitution. So maybe it's a more viable,
realistic
immediate step. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. Then that actually, yeah, that's very interesting that you say this, because if you're okay with it, I can give my perspective on revolution. Let's say in Iraq, for example. Yeah, and then I can, yeah. So I'll do this, and then I'll discuss an interesting point to be made about this. Let's say the viability of third parties being made a thing that can be done in the United States. If that were the case, then what that would mean is that let's say parliamentary system within the United States would allow for European-style parties to exist. With European-style parties existing, that means you'd have, of course, probably Democrat and Republicans would remain, but you would have a Social Democratic Party, a Green Party, other sorts of, parties having, a proportional representation according to the vote that they get, which is perfectly fine. But the thing is that, in my personal opinion, what this would do is it would improve the living standards of the American people, because they would have greater representation, and as a result, they could possibly actually get certain things that have wide support, like, for example, universal healthcare, which is widely supported by the populations that are actually affected by it, that require it, which is practically the entire American population at this point. But that is something that the American people do generally want, and they cannot get with the current two-party system. Another one would be, for example, the debt annulments, the student debt annulment. That's another thing that could generally maybe be carried out through a parliamentary system. But at the end of the day, I personally think that even in a parliamentary system, socialism, reaching for the working class to seize political power in any meaningful sense of the word, would not be possible, even in a parliamentary system. And the perfect example to give would be the European social democracies, which have all but either crumbled or fully retreated, or have just become very set in their ways of, rather than trying to get rid of capitalism they had written in their party programs 100 years ago, now they just want to be administrators of a much kinder, gentler capitalism, if that makes sense. And I personally think that this would also occur in the United States. I just want to know if you agree about this, and then I can talk about the Iraqi concept of revolution.
Oh yeah, for sure. Social democracy is a sinkhole. Now, the European democracies are better than ours. I mean, Norway, Sweden, say what you want about them being co-opted by the capitalist establishment, but America fucking sucks. So I would still, even like if I dropped my dreams of being a socialist, I would still prefer them to what we have now. But yeah, it's important to like recognize the closer you get to administrative control of the state, the harder it is, I think, to like take that last leap. In part, I think, because the living standards for everyone rise to a point where the idea of any kind of revolutionary action seems, well, I mean, it doesn't really seem worthwhile. Usually revolutionaries are people desperate or at the brink of poverty or destitution or starvation. And we just don't, well, I mean, in America we kind of have that, but like the Norwegian population's not going to be rising up to do that. My goal would be that we could approach social democracy, and I mean, realistically speaking, I think if socialism's to come from this world, it would probably be coming from the global south. And that our goal, as my goal as an American, would be to make this country as class conscious as possible, and to effectively neuter its militaristic and intelligence operations, so that should socialism arise in other countries, the victims of global capitalism, it would be more difficult for us, I mean America, not socialists in America, for America to retaliate or to destroy the fruits of the socialist labor. That would be my goal. We have to make America better, we have to get the population on board with socialism, and we have to keep America from interfering with other countries that can reach out and, you know, and touch the sun.
Perfect, beautiful. That's beautifully said, because that was what I was hoping to get to. That's the point that I wanted to reach. Because when it comes to generally social democracy, and when we think about it, even at best, even if we achieve these improvements for working classes in these imperial core countries, the issue still ends up being that social democracy, as good as it may be for the population that is experiencing, usually a European or a European-derived population, like in North America being Canada or the United States, the issue is that social democracy still subsists on the exploitation of the third world. I don't want to use the emotional term exploitation, but what I mean is...
No, it's totally true. Yeah. All the shiny buildings in
Come
Finland,
on.
like for every shiny building, we have 3 sweatshops somewhere in...
Alright,
you know,
2 more tries.
Exactly.
Yeah,
in Bangladesh, or exactly, or the Kenyan tea plantations, exactly, and that's really nice to note, because then it shows, okay, beautiful. When you have a system, not to just, I'm not going to bring in theory. There's just the one line that's.
I'm
I'd
not
like to bring in
allergic
from Lenin.
to it. I've read a little. No, hit me.
Yeah. The one line that I would like to bring is the title of Lenin's work. Simply, capitalism. That imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. It's very interesting that this particular, when we say that imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism, what this means is that capitalism has reached a point in its development where it cannot continue to expand without the presence of imperialism. Now, what does this mean concretely? What this means is that in order, the natural progression of capitalism has occurred first in Europe, and then it's extended elsewhere in the world, like into the United States onwards, is for capitalism is to expand into other markets, right? Not only to expand into other markets, but to develop the export of capital. Now, what happens normally, or what is the trend that has been observed, is that with the development of social democracy in Europe, when I mention about social democracy, by the way, just as a side note, Venezuela and Bolivia are trying to do a form of social democracy, but their, let's say, growth is bolstered, or at least supported by the wealth that they generate from their natural resources, right? It's almost a form of primitive accumulation on a national scale that isn't dependent on the exploitation of other populations. This is radically different from what was experienced by the European countries. But with the development of social democracy, what happened was that there became a stratification of working classes in the world. What occurred was that the working classes of, let's say, Bangladesh or Kenya or Peru became on, let's say, one side, and then the working classes of Germany and Sweden and Britain and Canada and the US became on another side. Now, this is not to say like this is a nefarious thing that capitalists try to do. No, this is just a natural progression of capitalism. What started occurring was that there became, or what began is a formation of a labor aristocracy, as Lenin and Marx and Engels termed it. Now, what this labor aristocracy basically means is that the labor of and the value that is produced outside of these imperial core nations was being used to subsidize the living standards of the working classes in the imperial core. This is a concept. This is built upon the concepts of, for example, unequal exchange, the concept of value transference, as it was explained by Samir Amin, the concept as it was developed by Sack Cope, for example, and then beautifully shown in his book Divided World, Divided Class, on and on. Now, what this means is that social democracy, as you have very rightly stated, is a sinkhole. It will not allow this next leap into socialism to occur because it specifically makes it so that a section of the of the working class, of these imperial core countries have their interests set somewhat along with the bourgeoisie of those countries. A small segment of, or not small, but a considerable enough segment, not the whole population. For example, I would not say that the Native American population within the U.S. or the poorest Chicano and black communities in the U.S. and even the very poor white populations across the Midwest and what have you, the areas are so heavily hit by the opioid epidemic in the United States. Oh no, I'm not saying that these people would necessarily constitute part of the labor aristocracy. This would require much more research. But generally, when we take a look particularly at skilled labor within these imperial core countries, we see that the very fact that their wages are so high, for example, are based particularly on the value transference from the imperial periphery into the imperial core, which as a result causes the interests of these new working classes to not align with the working classes abroad, like for example in Bangladesh, let's say, but instead align more with the continued bourgeois, let's say, encroachment on these other places, the continued development of imperialism, the continued administration of social democratic parties and their, as mentioned before, milder, gentler capitalism.
Well, you know, I'm not going to disagree. Like, even in America today, and America has a lot of poor people, a person working off minimum wage has access to some amenities that a person working in Bangladesh never would have. Not just as a matter of infrastructural development, but like gods, from everything from the wages to what they can expect from their politician. Workers in the West or the global North or whatever are, you know, privileged in some respects. I don't think that doesn't make them part of the proletariat. I think they are. This is one of the reasons why I come down so hard on nationalism, the right and the left, because I think one of the greatest enemies we have to global socialism is the idea that it's possible to procure such a society with an insular, nationally oriented worldview. It would take cooperation amongst the working class in first and third world nations to bring about anything meaningful. And I think that, well, most leftists are better about that than most non-leftists. There are some leftists, I think, who are very, very nationally oriented. Of course, everyone's going to focus on their home country more than others, just as a matter of where they're born and what they're taught to care about. No, I think I agree with you completely. This is why I'm very critical of SOCDEMs as well. Because while it may well be true that Sweden and Norway and what have you were a lot better than America in a great many measurable ways, the fact remains that capitalists are always going to extract their resources from the places whence it costs the least to extract them, and that's, at least for now, always going to be in the developing world. And privately, personally, I kind of get the feeling that even in a post-scarcity society, even in a society where automation really can take care of all manufacturing and all industrial work, I still get the feeling that we're going to maintain that economic divide. I feel like there's something preferably exclusionary to the global north about keeping the global south in poverty. There's something socially requited there, like it's a component of our luxury, the knowledge that somewhere in Africa or Southeast Asia there are people who can't find enough food to eat.
Exactly, and that's a very nice point to make. I mentioned something very similar in my video on unequal exchange that I have, where I mentioned that most likely the concepts of unequal exchange and value transference will continue to, at least in some meaningful sense, even under socialism. Suppose even in a fully socialist world, these sort of things will still exist and they would require to be combated. It would require the active, let's say, de-industrialization of many parts of the imperial core and the active industrialization, I was going to say re-industrialization, because many of these parts of the third world have never been industrialized. Right. To equalize the level of productive capacity across them and to use the...
Well, how much so much do I have now? 540. is it? Wonder. Thanks for coming in. Me